There was a man called Simonides of Ceos, a poet from ancient Greece. He'd fled Athens, the great Greek capital, to take refuge in Thessaly. It was a time when legend still breathed. One evening, Simonides was invited to a banquet. A wealthy Thessalian family had opened their great hall for a feast. Simonides was known for his verses, his odes, celebrating events and people. The hall was magnificent, buzzing with voices, laughter, and clinking of goblets. It was a kind of evening that seemed suspended in time. At one point, though, during the banquet, a servant approached discreetly and told Simonides that two young men, horsemen, were waiting for him outside with an urgent message. Curious, maybe slightly troubled, he stepped out into the night. There under the stars stood no one. He was intrigued, wondering where the horsemen had gone. He was interrupted in his astonishment by a tremor beneath his feet. A deafening crash tore through the air. He turned around. The banquet hall, where he'd been just moments before, had collapsed into ruins. Surreal. At some point, they needed to identify the bodies now mutilated and buried under the stone. But the scene was chaotic. The dead were unrecognizable. No one could say who was who and who sat where, who wore what, except, strangely, Simonides. Calmly, he began to name them one by one. Not from their faces, which were unrecognizable, but from something else, where each person had been seated. He was a master at the art of memory with a particular method known as the Loci, a mental map and memory palace that he used to memorize and recite poems, among other things, probably. Whether this story is true or not is not really the point. What's interesting and well documented is that the first monks adapted the art of memory, which became an art of meditation, where they walked through the words of scriptures as if they were wandering in their mind. Each verse, carefully placed in the chambers of memory, visited again and again until it became not only known but lived. This episode is the 7th of a series of 8 on the science of learning. The previous episode, we did a detour into the mind, intelligence, and how they relate to learning. In this one, we are discussing two mnemonic approaches. They are very helpful to remember dates, lists of items, or prepare for long presentations or a speech. But before delving into them, the Loci Method and the PeG system, it's important that you understand the basic principle behind them. That basic principle relies on two important elements. The first is that we remember better when we understand or perceive what we're learning through linking it to what we already know. And I explained this in the 3rd episode and expounded deeper on it in episode 4 and 5 of the series. The second is that the more familiar, mastered, and ingrained that's something that you link in your new knowledge is, the easier you retain the new element being linked to that thing that is kind of ingrained in your mind. And together, they form the principle that you remember knowledge easily if you can link it to something really well mastered in your brain, either through time and practice or something that has an emotional significance. The Loci Method. So the Loci uses visualizations of familiar spatial environments to improve recall of information. Suppose you want to remember the key points of the previous episode of the series, the 6th one. And I started the episode with the brain structure. That led to two conclusions. First, that our genes define the raw foundation of our mental abilities. And second, that our brain undergoes maturation through our lives based on how we push it, what we do. Then I discussed three elements in support for the latter conclusion: myelination, the recoding of information into the automaticity center of the brain, which arises from practice, and third, neurogenesis. First, you take a physical location that you know very well. It could be your room, your workspace, the street where you live, a cafe you know very well. And you could also choose to discover a new place and pay attention to all the details of that place that you would visit regularly to deeply root the element of the place in your mind. Now, imagine entering the location in question. Let's say your room. Imagine it's dark, and as you enter the room, you turn on the light. You can attach to the light switch the image of the first conclusion, that our genes define the raw foundation of our brain. Now, I'll personally add the layer that the switch is like the moment of conception, where my genome is made and is switched on and my potential set. Then the lamp lights up and you attach the second conclusion to the lamp. I would add that the lamp is the influence of my environment, the same way the light could not work even if the switch is working well. Meaning that the environment plays a key role in what's activated in that field of potential. To justify that second conclusion, I discussed myelination, recoding, and neurogenesis. So, there are multiple ways you could go about doing this. You could actually study online the different parts of a bulb and attach to each of the element of the bulb. You can pick three of them. The three elements I discussed: myelination, recoding, and neurogenesis. For example, the glass cover might be myelination. You can find a story to link to it properly. The recoding of information to the filament, right? And the base to neurogenesis. Or you could continue with your room and you can assign myelination to the chair, recoding to the table, and neurogenesis to a painting in your room. And create the narrative to glue them together. Interesting enough, these narratives do not have to be logic. In fact, the most nonsensical, ridiculous, and ludicrous, the better, because you'll have a better time remembering. Then you practice making these associations yourself. And guess what? The practice will be best if you use the basic principles we discussed in episode 2. Spacing, interleaving, and variation. And voila. Let's say you're a student and you go to a cafe, let's say every morning. The next time you go, pay attention to how organized things are inside. Once you know it well, you can associate each spot with a piece of something that you're trying to learn, a speech you're preparing, and visiting the cafe will just be a rehearsal of whatever you're trying to learn. If you walk the same street every day, pay attention to the objects in different places, and you can associate items from a list of, let's say, 30 boring things you're trying to know for an exam. Walking every day will help you memorize, and actually walking will be a little bit more interesting. Definitely more interesting than sitting at your desk and repeating it. Now, the PeG system. It is a technique that helps with information retention through association as well. But here, you use the system pretty much to memorize numbers, digits, important dates, anything that has numbers attached to it, deck of cards. So that requires something. You need to have a system in place that has associated numbers with specific images or combinations of images, creating scenes which you then use to later recall information like dates, long lists. And for example, in my PeG system, the number 0 is associated with si in English and so in French, not so. The number 1 is associated with toi in English and toi in French. The number 2 with ni in English and ne in French. Number 44 to rire in French, that is laughter, and don't yet have a representation in English. Number 941 is associated with porte in French. Number 26 is associated with Nietzsche. The number 615 to the word shuttle, and that's the last 3 digits of my university ID number. Now, memorizing the date of, let's say, September 10th, 1958 would involve imagining a giant cup. That's the 10, in which I see dirty footprints, and I see them in the bottom of the cup, which is pas in French, because 9 is the number associated with September, associated in my system with pas. And seeing those dirty things inside my cup intrigues me, and I gently tap it. I tap over it, right? And to see if it's really dirt or anything or something else. And I see that it's dirt, and I use a vegetal sponge. It's called loofah 58 in my system to clean it. So the tap is 19 in my system, and 58 is the vegetal sponge loofah, and I clean it. So to remember the date, I just remember, right, the cup, the footprint, my tap, and the cleaning, and that's it. So as you can see, my PeG system is highly individualized to me. But there are rules that'll make the process so fun and easier and interesting. You've probably noticed that the number 0 is associated with the S sound, and that the associated words are so and si. And there is no other consonant sound in so and si except for S. In the same way, 1 is linked to toi, or more precisely the consonant T, the consonant sound T. And here's where it gets brilliant. 10 makes tas, which contains in that order only the consonant sounds T and S, which makes the memorization even more memorable. Right, so you have 1 0 tas, because 1 is T and 0 is S. So I confess that it took me a couple of months to create and automate my PeG system, and I'm still creating associations of new numbers until now. But it's so fun, and you'll be amazed by the number of things and the amount of information you can store almost effortlessly. Speaking of automation, in episode 8 of the series, I'll introduce you to the software that not only helped me internalize my PeG system, but also allowed me to learn multiple languages, prepare for academic tests, and perform at a much higher level in my studies. I'm still at it, and also in my life in general. At the end of this episode, you probably feel like you've understood it very well. How do you make sure that you have? Ask yourself, what's the PeG system? What's the Loci Method? What's one association of the PeG system that you could create? You'll find the video illustration available for download in the description, along with the PDF file summarizing it. Bye-bye.